I'm Susan Tepper. I'll be the moderator for the panel, and each of our panelists, who are all published authors and or editors, will each introduce themselves, and we'll talk to you about what small press is, what your opportunities are in small press, and then we'll open it up to questions, because I'm sure that you will have a lot of questions, and we'll hopefully be able to answer everything. So let's start with Bill Yarrow, and we'll just come right down the line.
Hi, I'm Bill Yarrow. I am a professor of English at Joliet Junior College. I teach creative writing online, and I published a number of books of poems. I have a chapbook out from Urbachi Press called Wrench, and I have a book called 14 from Naked Mannequin Press in Chicago. And this is my book, Pointed Sentences, that came out January 2012 from Blazevog Press, a small publisher in Buffalo. I am currently the poetry editor at Scissors and Spackle magazine, which is an online magazine, and also for a magazine called Emerge for new writers and up-and-coming writers. I was the poetry editor at a magazine called This Literary Magazine, and I worked there for a number of years, put out a number of issues, and just recently the editor has decided that she, with her new full-time job, has decided that she doesn't have time to devote to that magazine anymore, so that magazine is still online, but it's no longer accepting submissions or publishing any new issues. And I'll fill you in more about myself, I guess, as we go on.
Ralph Pennell?
Yeah. My name is Ralph Pennell. I teach literature at Bunker Hill in the Boston area. I also teach online, teach creative writing online for a school back in Minnesota. I actually lived in the Twin Cities for 11 years before I moved to the Boston area. And I am the founding editor and fiction editor of an online literary journal called Midway Journal, which is published out of St. Paul, as much as an online entity could be from a specific area. But the name actually derives from a specific area in the Twin Cities, the area between St. Paul and Minneapolis, which is called the Midway, which is where the state fair actually takes place. And if you do go online and look at the journal, our logo is a Ferris wheel. It speaks to a lot of different parts of the journal, a lot of different considerations that we had when we started the journal, and I'll talk more about that later. And I am, my poetry manuscript is in the hands of a publisher at the moment, so I'm hoping that that will come out soon. Otherwise, I've published numerous pieces in print and online journals throughout the years. I also write reviews, a review of Susan's book.
He wrote a beautiful review for me.
And
we didn't even know each other then.
Yeah, so published reviews with various places, probably most notably Green Taxi Review of books, if you're familiar with Green Taxi. Yeah. And save the rest for last.
Okay. Jaime?
Oh, sure. My name is Jaime Fortuño, or Jamie Fortuño, but it's Jaime is easy. I am a co-owner of Leatherback Press. Leatherback Press is a small company that is trying to disrupt industry a little bit. I've disrupted two industries along with a lot of other people. One was the coffee industry in the 90s when I unlike all of you very accomplished literary people, I am a Wharton undergrad, Harvard MBA guy, so I'm a business person, I'm sorry to say. But both at Wharton and also the MBA level at Harvard, I always took complete courses, and I spent a lot of time writing and being on all the plays and whatever. So I fell in love with that, and I spent a long time being a coffee exporter, coffee grower, worked with clients in about 25 countries. And also as a GM for a large ad agency, both in Puerto Rico and then here in New York. And I'm also one of, like the old ad, like I'm not only the president, also a client, but I'm also a client. I completed a book, and it's an experiment within Leatherback Press. It's called the Canada Chronicles. It's a humorous fiction book. It's actually selling very well. It does, without an agent or anything like that. We're just doing it very disruptively. And my objective in doing it and being in here in this industry, I see a lot of great people with incredible stories that I'm actually meeting here. By the way, Luis is my mentor, so that's why I'm here.
Louis is your mentor?
Yeah, so I mean, he's been for 4
Fabulous.
years, so
I
he's the
love
one who got me
Louis.
to write the book and whatever. With his help and Tara McCann, who's my partner, who is on HBO right now, and a couple other people, we're just trying to give an audience to writers that are not getting it because it's just such a small, bottleneck. And I am an experiment. And if it works with me, I'm like, I put the serum in myself, so see if I survive. We want to open it up to a lot of other people, so we're putting our money behind that.
Great, thank you. Stephanie?
Well, I'm Stephanie Dickinson, and unlike everyone here, I work a day job and writing here in the neighborhood. I published a novel from Spike and Dival called Half Girl, a novella from Spike and Dival called Plus Series, and I'm just out with, from Red Mountain Press, Port Authority Orchids, a collection of stories. I've been a co-publisher and editor of Skid Row Penthouse for 14 years. This is our journal that's in production right now. My co-editor says Skid Row Penthouse is the most unjustifiably ignored journal of its kind. Perhaps because its name conjures images of homeless people in suggestive poses, or because of the conspicuous absence of big names and or contributors' notes. Or maybe it stands against the in vogue ironic writing that can only be described as straining so hard to be hip it hurts. But the journal has been funded entirely by the editors, and perhaps for this reason, their little Bible has more than succeeded in its goal of obscurity.
Wow. It's a very good book, by the way. Thank you, Stephanie. I'm Susan Tepper. I've been actually writing full-time for 20 years. I think I would really be really hot right now, right? But anyway, I struggle along. I've published 4 books, 1 of poetry, 3 of fiction, and I have a new one coming out in September, which I'm really excited about, with an Australian publisher, a small press publisher, called Pure Slush. And I also have been an editor at various magazines. I'm currently an editor at Flash Fiction Chronicles, which is a large online thing. I don't know what you call it. It's a thing. And I do interviews. I do interviews of writers whose books I love. And so I call the series Uncovered, meaning that, I'm going to get really deep and down with these writers. And it's amazing because they love doing it. And they love to get uncovered. It's like, they're so obscure. And all of a sudden somebody's coming in and ripping off their armor and letting them just lay it all out there. So, and also I think that it helps the writers because we, small press people, try to help each other. It's very hard in the writing world. You need your friends, you need your allies, and you need good people around you. So, I would never, for instance, interview somebody whose book I didn't like. I have to love the book, and I would never, as a publisher, have published any work that just truly didn't sing to me. And because we also want to maintain a certain integrity, with what we're publishing and be really proud of it. So that's basically my deal. The small press today for the new and emerging writer is really where it's at. The big commercial publishers, I think there's 5 or 6 of them. They may just be 5 now because it was a merger. They call them the big 5, the big 6. I kind of lost track, but that's Simon & Schuster, Penguin, HarperCollins, etc. It's really off, if next to impossible, to get in there, unless you have some sort of a connection. For fiction, the nonfiction situation is different. If you've done some spectacular thing, nonfiction, or you have some kind of spectacular life where you can write a memoir, you could probably get an agent and get a deal. But fiction right now, exciting fiction, I think, is happening in the small press world. And, well, you guys can jump in at any time. Yeah. I mean, there are so many small presses. There are literally hundreds and hundreds. They're print, online, combination, and it's not all that hard if you work hard and you put up a good product to get yourself published. But you do have to really work hard at your craft.
Susan, do you think that that the road to publishing is just to submit to a small press, or that you should get your work into magazines and journals online or
Who wants to answer that?
Yes. Obviously, trying to start by getting a book published is the more difficult way to go. Not impossible, and I know plenty of people who have done it that way, but I think, especially for new and emerging writers, the best thing to do is to prove that you can actually publish something, and so the small press, the independent literary journals is how your place to begin. I know plenty of fiction writers who skipped the initial stage, which is to publish a series of short stories and then even try to find a publisher to take the entire collection, which is almost impossible, although short stories are making a comeback now. At least that's the word. Because most publishers won't publish a short story collection because they don't sell.
Yeah.
But that, by and large, has been the traditional route. But that's not to say that you can't actually publish a book, like a novel, without doing that route. But speaking for myself and speaking from people that I know in the industry, at all spectrums of their careers, new, beginning, emerging, well-known.
Half dead.
Yeah, half dead. No matter where you are in your careers, either you are doing the work yourself, setting it out, or people are asking you for work. So that part of your career is actually never gone. So it's always a good idea to start sending your work out, getting familiar with who takes what, where your work fits, who your audience is, and then you can start making other decisions about where you might want to send that full collection.
I do think you have to just get your work out there. I mean, I think a lot of people write a lot, collect their stuff, and just never share it, and I think it's important to put it out as much as you can. Of course, by submitting to these magazines, you do get used to rejection as well as acceptance occasionally.
That's right.
And that's
And
an
that never
important.
goes away.
That's an important. It never goes away. It's an important thing for every writer to develop that.
And then I wanted to say,
Yeah,
to your point, that I personally, how many of you are fiction writers, by the way? Okay, mostly. And I know it's easy to assume that people don't read your work, and yeah, there's a lot of ways to sort of get yourself excluded from getting your work read. Some editors are ruthless about, like, did you spell your, is there a spelling error somewhere in the entire manuscript, and they'll just ditch the whole thing, which I feel is a little bit unfair. Me personally, my stance on this, and this is one of the benefits of small publishers, I am keenly interested in new voices, and the emerging voices that don't quite have the credibility that some others do. I read each piece, some not all the way through, I mean, that is part of the industry, but I'm looking for voices. I generally, even though we ask in our submissions that you send a bio, you send a cover letter, I don't care where you published. I don't care if you published in the Paris Review. I'm interested in the work on the page. If the language doesn't speak to me, then it's not something I'm interested in. I don't want to know. I don't want to publish somebody just because they published in the Paris Review.
Right.
Because I'm not trying to be the Paris Review. I'm the editor at Midway Journal. I want work that speaks to Midway.
Right.
Okay. Now, on the other hand, I wanted to ask Jaime because I wondered now, did you, before you wrote your book, did you send out stories to various places, or did you
No.
just come forward with the book?
Well, my first thought was, I guess I'm a marketing guy. I thought, who would read this? Obviously, now where do I start from, And I realized
So let me just make it clear, so you didn't send out like stories
I didn't
around
go
before
to,
the book?
well, no, I published at business, when I was in school, and I wrote for, politicians, and I wrote for television, I wrote for a lot of people.
Yes.
So, I did spend a lot of that time writing, but I never, but when I said I'm going to make a commitment to write for, in a different language, my main language is Spanish, 1,000 hours to do this, I said, well, I'm not going to write this and then sit on a shelf. And I saw all the places where somebody could say no. An agent could say no. A publisher could say no. A small bookstore could say yes, but by the way, here are the 9 books that I didn't sell out of the 10 you gave me, and then give me my money back. So I said, like, this doesn't work to me, So in that sense, I started talking to. I wrote a book, and I found 5 heavy buyers of books, and I gave them the book to read. They're all women, They all cried. They could cry, laugh, think, and grow in the book. No, this was my 4 conditions. You have to laugh, you have to cry, you have to think, you have to grow. If they all 5 of them, they all did, at least they told me they did, I said, then we can do it.
Did you pay them to do this?
No?
I'm just kidding.
No, with coffee, only with coffee. No, but it's like, I learned that from the Canadian Railroad Company. We had a case once where they couldn't get people to take it. People were flying from the East Coast, Canada to the West Coast. Until we said, what can we do about it? I said, well, why don't we talk about the view from your, how many days you're traveling? And we filled up the place. Why? Because like enjoy the ride. So I was thinking, who should your audience be? And then start with that, and then don't try to get me that I have to run to a meeting in Vancouver to take a train. I'll never take it. Take the plane. But someone will enjoy the view. So that person has to be different. In my case, I in this book and the other things that we're looking at, say, okay, who is the audience, and then go from there.
Very nice.
Anyway.
Stephanie, when you're with your magazine, Skid Row Penthouse, you get like how many submissions would you say you get per issue?
We get hundreds.
Hundreds of submissions. So when you are reading submissions, like what are you looking for?
You recognize it usually immediately when you see it. We're looking for an aliveness, I think, more than anything. We wrote a little manifesto about what we're looking for, and we consider it a home for wayward voices, insect souls, architects of letters, a place to hide one's reign, a sanctuary for the perfections of brokenness, a book of unkept beauty, a mirror where one can hibernate, those kinds of things. We're looking for aliveness. We notice that it's a harder sell to accept a fiction piece than it is poetry. I don't know, because it's much easier to read a compressed poem. But the stories of fiction, we find that so many of them sound alike. And you can tell that in the first paragraph. And immediately when you see something that has image, that has voice, I know if we see punctuation errors or spelling errors, if it has voice, we'll go and correct that. I mean, my co-editor is a wonderful proofreader and copy editor, and that's his specialty. So if we like a piece,
You will work the piece.
We'll work the piece, and we'll work with the writer too until we feel that it's publishable. So it's that liveliness and voice that we're after.
That's really important, because I have been an editor also at a few magazines, and one of them was a magazine called the Istanbul Literary Review, and the magazine was run by Gloria Mendak and myself. We did the whole thing, and our webmaster was in Turkey, and it's kind of weird how we ended up with this magazine, but it's like a story in itself. But anyway, so we ran this magazine, and our submissions were so bad. There were just, people would send us things with like so many typos and such sloppy work. This is online. And years ago, everything had to be on paper, so you had to be really neat and everything. And the criteria for that has really kind of slid a lot. Well, anyway, we used to get all this stuff, and you just couldn't read it. It was awful. So in the end, we would go to writers that we really love and say, well, what do you have? Do you have something that's new? Can we see it? We didn't always take their work. We had to like it. But at least we knew that we had a fair shot, because we knew what that writer could do. And that was kind of depressing to me, because I wanted to discover things that came in. And I would say we only really, out of the entire issue, we would only really take 4 people that came through the regular submission thing for that magazine, because we couldn't get anything that was really quality.
That's interesting. I have a similar kind of story. I'm on Facebook with 1 million people, and I got a note from Joni Reese, who's a writer, and who worked at the magazine that I eventually became a poetry editor at. And she said, Bill, these submissions are terrible. We don't have anything good. It's just, I'm so depressed. Do you have anything to send in? And I had a couple things, and I sent them, and they were accepted, and I was very pleased. And subsequent to that, she said, the poetry editor, a previous poetry editor, quit, and she said, would you be interested in being the poetry editor? And I said, yeah, that would be great. And so that networking kind of thing happens all the time, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wanted to add on to what she was talking about. I'm sorry to hear about the process at Istanbul.
Yeah, it was really depressing.
No,
The magazine shut down, by the way. Not because of that.
Oh, it did?
We put out wonderful issues because we.
That's great.
Solicit.
It shut down because our webmaster disappeared
Oh, no.
Oh my
in
god.
Turkey.
Wow.
Yes.
Oh my god.
Recently?
Oh my God! Exactly.
Wow.
Totally disappeared. We were like,
Wow.
and this has been for a year.
Oh no.
So we finally just said, well, we were sort of on hiatus, and now we're sort of nowhere. I had actually left after that, because I had too many commitments. But Gloria kept going with it, and then there was just no magazine.
Wow.
Yeah, that's the thing. There's a lot of turnover too.
The thing that I wanted to add to what she said was, me personally, and I know that a lot of others don't do this, but I do work with writers whose work is very promising. So if you get, and if an editor approaches you and says, we like the work, but we need you to make these changes,
Yeah.
get out of your own way.
Yeah.
Make the changes, let them have the work, let it be,
Yeah.
let the work be the thing that they want it to be, because they're the ones who, they're the kingmakers.
Well,
They're the ones
up
who
to a
will
certain
help.
point
Yeah.
though, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Because I had a piece that an editor was interested in, and I said, we want to make a few changes, and he took out, 80% of the poem that I'd sent,
Oh, dear.
and it was, I really wanted to be in this magazine, and it was like, I just cannot live with this new version. This didn't sound like me at all. So, but yes, work with the editor is.
I had a young author, wanted him to make some changes to the piece, and after a couple of exchanges, he sent me this seething email.
Oh.
No other editors ever asked me to make any changes to anything I've ever written. I'm like, well, you want to be with me, you gotta make the changes. I can't publish it this way.
Yeah.
We're gonna open it up for questions in a few minutes.
I got a question particularly about that.
Okay, hold on to it, okay? Well, I'll get you first.
I just want to make one comment too.
Yeah, go ahead.
As an editor of a poetry magazine, I would go to a lot of poetry. I'm from Chicago. I'd go to a lot of poetry readings in Chicago, and if I saw someone, there was a lot of open mic readings and of course features. But at the open mic, if someone read a poem that I particularly liked, I would approach them after the reading and say, I really like that poem. Here's our magazine. Here's the address. Please send us that poem. We'd like to consider publishing it. It wasn't a guarantee, but we want to take a look at it. And in that way, you can recruit a lot of new voices and find a way to get the stuff that you want. If you're just alert to that kind of thing, I think.
Absolutely.
I'd like to add on to that too. I agree. I publish things in a lot of journals. If I see a writer whose work I admire in the journal,
Oh, nice.
I'll email them or
Oh, that's
try to
really
contact them. Because you do find out that you do need to solicit a good amount of the work because of the quality of work coming in really that doesn't have a finished quality to
I
it.
feel really fortunate here. I solicit so few authors
Oh,
because
you are lucky then.
yeah, from the first issue, I've always found something that I wanted to publish, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that I'm really willing to spend time with the work, and
Yeah.
it was
We're
one of
very
you
willing
said
to spend time
some
with
you said yeah. I'm not saying you don't, but like
No, not you.
there was something you said about like immediately whether
You don't
the
know
work.
immediately, huh?
There have been pieces where I wasn't sure until I kept going. There was something that kept asking me to read. I wasn't drawn in right away, but I kept reading, and finally the work revealed itself to me in the way that it was supposed to. I had this piece called An Inconclusive Visit Among Strangers, and this will also give you some idea of the kind of things that I'm interested in publishing. And that's exactly what it was. There was no crisis. Each character, and there were 3 different viewpoints, was telling the same story as they saw it. It was a story about something that never happened, sort of in a Godottian term.
Interesting.
But the title drew it all together. Once I figured out what the author was doing, because there was no action in the first section, like all my immediate expectations about what a fiction is supposed to do, I personally had to reassess my own methods, and the piece ended up in.
Could I add something?
Of course.
If I were sitting in one of those chairs and thinking, okay, how do I get something published or considered? I guess the first thing, before it gets to someone telling you no, would it make sense to, in addition to the 5 friends, have someone that has real criteria that you have access to consider it, you know. In my case, I didn't even tell anyone in my family until Louis read it and said, okay, go ahead and do it. But don't expose yourself to unnecessary punishment by going out and say, okay, I'm going to go out and do this and have no idea. I mean, it's like when you go out, during the day, you go to a mirror and check yourself out a little bit. When you go to Walmart, you might think that people don't do that, but people normally do. So the same with, and well, seriously, I mean, you've seen all the emails with all the photos. But anyway, the same goes for your work, and the difference between your work and us, and as a human being, is that we have a shelf life, hopefully 100 years, but the work goes on forever. So if you really have to go check yourself in the mirror before you go out when you're putting your fiction work or something else out there. So. But at the same time, the only thing I've learned is the process that there's no right answer, and nobody knows everything.
Oh, for sure. It's such a mishmash. I feel so confused all the time. Serious. Every time, 20 years I've been doing this. I started off with like paper, envelopes and all that, a lot of us. And a lot of postage too. It was expensive. And I went through a lot of printer cartridges. Because they would say, we'll take your story, but don't send it to anyone else. Oh, sure. I'd send out 20 copies at a time. Nobody ever wanted it, the same story, ever. And so, it was hard in those days because they were really persnickety. Like you couldn't use staples. You must use a paper clip. You had to have everything paginated with your name and the title, blah blah blah. But now, with online, here's what I would suggest. Like, a lot of people use, for instance, Duotrope. Are you guys familiar with Duotrope for looking for places to submit to?
Oh, yeah.
It's a wonderful online place. It lists all the literary magazines. It's a listserv. And New Pages lists literary magazines. That's a great site.
Poets and writers.
Poets and writers. I happen to like New Pages because you can look at the picture on the cover and you can see what the magazine looks like and get a feel for it. And it's just called New Pages, oneword.com. And but here's the thing: every magazine has their own submission deal. So you really want to look, when you look at the magazine, you say, gee, I'd really love to send to this magazine. Go to where it says submissions and see how they want things and how they accept things. Because sometimes they want you to go through a submissions process called submishmash, submittable. Other people want you to send it in the body of the email. They want to open attachments. Other people want an attachment. You can go crazy. So you really should, because if you don't do it right, they're going to kick it back. And you've wasted your time. And that's really like, time is time, right? So I'm always very careful with that stuff, about just looking to see how it's supposed to be done.
There's a great, in addition to listservs that give you an idea where to send your work, there's also a great website called Rejection Wiki.
I've never seen that. What is it?
Rejection Wiki.
Is that like Wikipedia?
It's a wiki.
A wiki.
Yeah.
It's a wiki?
Where you can go and look at, because I think a lot of new and emerging writers don't always know that there are classification of rejections that tell you whether to resend work to that particular journal. And at Rejection Wiki, you can see the individual journals and the different levels of rejection slips that they might send to you. And so there's this code. If you get the general rejection slip that says, "Thank you for sending your work. We don't have a place for it," that usually means we really weren't interested in your work at all. Please don't send us anything else.
Get lost.
And then the next
We've all gotten them.
usually,
We've all
we
gotten
enjoyed
them.
reading these. Please, consider our journal, something like that. If you're getting those kinds of rejections, and here's the thing, because rejection hurts, right?
No.
If you're getting those kinds of rejections, that's actually an invitation to keep sending work to them. And so there's different ways to think about the kinds of rejections that you might get.
And the other thing about rejection is that it's very important to take it seriously. An editor looked at your work, maybe a number of editors looked at your work, thought about it, and for some reason it just didn't work. And so don't assume my work is perfect and nobody can tell me anything about it. I'm just going to send out the same thing over and over and over again. Relook at it. See if you can understand what might need tweaking or work or fixing or reconsideration or some kind of reimagining of it. And I know for myself, that's a very valuable part of the process. Sometimes I get work that's taken too quickly, and I'm unhappy with that version of that poem that appeared in some magazine. But if I get rejected, the kind of rejections that Ralph's talking about, then I'll, it makes it better. Rejection can be a good thing. It can help make your work be better, not stuck in some egocentric sense of itself.
I think we're going to start opening up to questions now because I'm not sure, I don't even know what time this panel ends.
It's like an hour.
12:15? Oh, good. Okay, so this is perfect. So I'm going to ask this man with the yellow hat.
I actually had another question, but when you were talking about editing, maybe I want to ask this one. When you submit a work to an editor and an editor sends it back to you, my fear is that they just say, you got to tighten it up. But do editors generally say specifically, and tell you what they suggest you do so that you can incorporate it, or do they just say this isn't right, too many paragraphs, take some out, and leave it all to you?
I personally, and I know this from sending my own work out, where I've gotten specific editorial ideas from specific editors. Because it's an online journal, people are sending stuff to me electronically. Actually, when we first started, this had something to do with gaining viability and visibility. We actually took snail mail accepted submissions. That's changed. And so I actually, if I have a piece that I'd like, but I can't publish it because it's just not ready yet, I use track changes. You know what track changes
You're
is?
so confusing.
I hate those.
I hate them.
It's an online editing program that you do through Office and through Office Word.
Jamie, do you know that?
And I will actually go through
I don't mind.
highlight the areas specifically
like
that
Then
I
you go
want.
completely
Yes.
get rid of each one, and it just won't go away by itself. It's horrible.
You have to accept
You
the
can-
change.
You have to accept the
I can't
changes.
stand it. I know.
It's a man against woman
You
thing.
can.
Because my editor, you have to go
Well,
through the
men
whole
like
thing.
track
No, no.
changes
No,
and women don't.
Right click, accept or reject the change.
How do you
Yeah,
get
but when you
That's
have
that
all
interesting.
time, and your
I
editor
like
said
to
you have to change this, you really don't have too many choices with some of it, and I have to go through, instead of just
Well,
saying universally accept, no, I have to go
You
through
can
each
pull
one.
up
Oh,
a
you-
copy of your own book and
Mhm.
work off both
If
documents.
you go up,
Yeah, that's
if you
what
go
I
up top, you can accept all changes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, to
Okay,
do
I
it.
don't want to spend too much time on track changes
Or
because there's a
reject
lot of
all
questions. Okay, we've already.
Did that answer your question well enough, or?
Yes.
I just basically
It
want
was
to know
good.
if
Okay.
what editors kind of tell you what they want changed, or do they just say it's not ready,
I
fix it?
think they do.
Yeah, that
Some
kind of
do, some don't, yeah.
It's different from
Yeah.
editor to editor. I want to take as many questions as possible. Yes. Who are you addressing this to? Pick somebody different.
Well,
wanna
it's
spread it
really,
around
it's really,
here?
it's really sort of for all of you because.
All right, I'll
I'm a
decide
little bit
who's
lost
going to
in
answer.
woods,
Go
so
ahead.
I'll just
Ralph
ask
talking.
you.
No, I'm just teasing you.
I have one complete work written in longhand, and I'm thinking about now going and typing it online. And someone said to me, "Oh, just get someone to type it for you." But I have in mind that as I'm typing it, I'm going to be revising it and making changes. But I heard something from one of you saying, it's okay to submit something that's not quite where you want. I mean, I know it's got a lot of,
Jaime,
problems
you wanna
with it
get that,
and
Jaime?
whatnot. I know it's got, but it's complete work. It's got a beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah.
You did it, but it's written in longhand.
Okay.
So I'm wondering, should I take my friend's advice and hire someone to just type it and then submit it somewhere so that I'm not getting in my own way and
Okay.
by typing it?
We understand.
Okay, get it.
Jaime?
My humble opinion is to do not step out of the house until you have your tie done as you want, which in this means to me that there will be comments that will come to you because someone has a subjective opinion about your work, but it has to be your best work, and it's not getting in the way. You have to get in the way because then if it's not in the way, your soul is not in it. So get in the way. Go from longhand. I mean, if you cannot type too well, use one of those things that you can, speak to, but get the flow because you didn't write it in one sitting. You were writing it over a period of time. So you might be, okay, I had coffee, I didn't have coffee, I had Cuba Libre, So you have to figure, okay, where is that line that you're drawing that's going to connect everything? And you might even change things around.
Great. Thank you. Yes.
I agree.
This lady here?
Yeah, I have a question to all the editors.
Stephanie will take it. I like to keep a democratic panel.
Very good. Yes.
When, for example, I submit work to magazine, how do I respond to rejection, and should I? And how do I respond to acceptance?
You mean
What's the best
like
way?
physically write to the editor?
Yeah.
You know, usually when you get a rejection, you know, you heard the different levels of, and oftentimes an editor will write in longhand if it's a snail mail submission or some comment that they'd like to see more work, or this piece came the closest, or, and to an acceptance, you'll be told that if you haven't provided your piece electronically, to provide it electronically, to provide a contributor's bio, and you'll be told when the piece will be either live online or in a journal. And with rejection, I still get them, and they hurt. I mean, they really do. And oftentimes, you will get a piece rejected many times, but then it will be accepted. So take heart with that. And
But you were wondering if you should answer a rejection?
Yeah.
No.
no,
No.
It's a really
no.
good idea. Because people actually
Sorry,
get
that was-
mad at editors, and I mean,
Yeah.
I have actually not had this experience, but I've heard other editors say they've been cursed out.
Yeah.
They were told they're so stupid, this and that, and that'll never get you in.
We were told.
It's better, you just be quiet, and
Plus the
throw it
editors-
away and forget about
The
it.
editors are busy, so even if you're just writing thank you, it's something they have to read. And
They don't wanna
it's just-
read it.
They don't want to do it, so don't respond to rejection.
Yes.